all I am. It isn't when I want the world right in my hands. I hate the beach. I am in my slippers and my blanket, and my reading pillow is right behind me, super comfy, from Target. And I have been reading John Green's Paper Towns, just finished reading it, and you know what? I'm going to do a book talk about it. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Paper Towns is by John Green, which is the author of The Fault in Our Stars, and The Fault in Our Stars is somewhere in my bookcase over there, and I read The Fault in Our Stars first, so I sort of had an idea of John Green's writing, though he actually wrote Paper Towns before he wrote The Fault in Our Stars, if I'm correct. I'm not sure on that, but I think so. I'm sure. So he wrote Paper Towns before he wrote The Fault in Our Stars. So I thought I sort of had an idea of John Green's writing. Like, really, he's able just to, like, write really relatable to kids and, like, teens and stuff, and just write with this tone where you would think he was a teenager himself. Because in The Fault in Our Stars, there's two teens, like Augustus and Hazel, and he wrote really well in the perspective of a teenager. So Paper Towns, I knew from beforehand, because the movie trailers and everything, that, you know, it was like a teen book. And after I saw the movie trailers and everything, I finally went to Barnes & Noble and got the book and read it. And, you know, so basically, when I first my thoughts before I read the book. So before I read this book, you know, I just stated sort of what I thought, you know. I thought it would be a book, you know, sort of copying the writing style of The Fault in Our Stars, like sort of similar to that, except with a different character. And when I read the book first, what I can say is I can tell that, you know, John Green, it was sort of in the writing style of The Fault in Our Stars. Of course, not 100% because he was dealing with different characters, but I could definitely tell, you know, that writing style, that, you know, that sort of just really frank way of writing, I guess you could say, that really, that way of writing that just sort of, you know, he really relates, and he's just sort of frank and blunt with the things he says with his characters, and I like that in The Fault in Our Stars, and he has that same attribute in Paper Towns. So definitely, so when I opened up this book, I was like, oh, so it's about this boy, and this girl he introduced really, you know, early was Margot. And I was like, oh, so is this going to be a love story like The Fault in Our Stars? But I thought, you know, I was like, oh, is this going to be like this sort of the exact same thing as The Fault in Our Stars, except a little different, where it's a boy and this girl. And so, yeah, so when I started reading the book, I was like, oh, this is going to be sort of like The Fault in Our Stars, or like, you know, the boy and the girl. And it was sort of, you know, the same writing style, because that's sort of John Green's writing style, is this way of really relating to his audience, which I think is great, and I think he did it in The Fault in Our Stars, and I think he did it in here, which was amazing. But when I started reading it, I think what made it sort of different from The Fault in Our Stars, because it is about like a boy and a girl, and like sort of love, but not love. But what I thought what made this story different is, as if dealing with Gus and Hazel in The Fault in Our Stars, you're dealing with Margot and this other boy. And Margot is sort of, you know, a little more tomboyish, a little more, not tomboyish actually, she's not tomboyish, but like, you know, just a little more rough, and a little more opening up, you know, his eyes, and just a little more rough, and a little more, you know, I'm gonna go at it because Margot is more of like a rough girl, I guess. Not like a rough girl, because she has like many boyfriends and stuff, but like a rebel a little bit. Just a little bit of a rebel, because they described that she was constantly, you know, going off and doing all these things and getting into all this trouble. But I think in The Fault in Our Stars, it wasn't like, Hazel was sort of a little bit afraid. Always a little bit afraid. And even Gus, he was the bold one, but he didn't quite go to these extremes that Margot did. And she, right from the first batch, she just captivated me as a character. And especially with all of her, you know, her depth I felt she had. Because, you know what's different between this novel is Margot, she was a rebel. But in all the other, you know, novels with some sort of rebel character, it's sort of like, oh, you know, that stereotypical rebel, I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to steal this stuff and I'm so cool. But with Margot, I felt it was so much different. Like, she had so much depth. The reasons she did the things she did is what I believe, after reading the story, was when she repeated the phrase, all I had to see is paper towns and paper people, was that she felt like she just had to do these things to, you know, sort of toss this world up into the air, because it was all this world of sameness, all this world of routine and over again, and she wanted to change, and she was frustrated with that. And I felt that's so much more depth than all these stereotypical stories I've read about these, you know, stereotypical characters being like, oh, you know, I'm such a rebel, I'm so cool, I'm doing all this stuff. But the reasons why Margot did what she did just captivated me, and I really, really liked her. Now, throughout this story, you know, she has this relationship with this boy, and I really, really liked Margot and this boy. What was his name again? Quentin, I think. Quentin, yeah, Quentin. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Quentin, this boy named Quentin. What I really liked about the relationship, and, well, not what I necessarily liked about it, but what I thought, you know, made so much more depth to the story was the fact that he, you know, he was once friends with her. He was once really close to her. And then she's like, when he said to one of his friends, oh yeah, I used to know Margot, I don't know her anymore. I thought that was sort of cool. I thought that created, you know, some tension and some depth, that he used to know this girl, but, you know, they got sort of separated far away. And I think it makes it for so interesting when they have conversations, like the way he acts around her and the way she acts around him. And it's like, you know, the friendship was sort of severed the last couple of years. And I think it adds so much more storyline, and I can sort of, you know, makes me relate to Quentin a little bit, because, you know, we've all sort of had that relationship before where, you know someone and you sort of grow apart, and I really like that. Now, I really, really liked sort of the up in the air calamity about this, how this girl that he sort of, his friendship was sort of severed the last couple of years, but he was willing to go out in the middle of the night and, like, do all this crazy stuff with her, and this girl that he knew well, but again, in the same way, he didn't know her, but he knew her. So he knew her well, but in perspective, but in another perspective, he didn't. So, but he was willing to go out and do all these extremes and to find her, and you know, I think he started, and you can see him start to realize how much he cares about Margot, because he was like, whoa, I'm doing all these things for her. I'm going out and I'm finding her, and he's like, sometimes we don't think when we're doing stuff, like, we don't think before we're like, whoa, we made this big risk for this person. You realize it after you're doing it. Like, that must mean they mean a lot to me, and you're not even realizing that when you're doing it. You realize it after, because you're like, my first instinct when I heard this person was missing was to go out and do these extreme things to find her, and it's like, whoa, that just proves to myself that she meant so much to me. So overall, definitely loved this book. So much more, actually, than The Fault in Our Stars. I think The Fault in Our Stars is a wonderful and a beautiful story, but I felt like this one has so much more depth, and I just love it so much. Like, I don't know, I feel it had so much more depth and so much more meaning. And I think The Fault in Our Stars is a brilliant meaning. I think The Fault in Our Stars is a brilliant, you know, story with so much depth, but, you know, these characters in here appealed to me much, much more, because I felt that in The Fault in Our Stars it was a beautiful story, but I do feel it was slightly sugar-coated, not just the slightest amount. You know, and I feel I really would have liked The Fault in Our Stars if they showed more of a raw side of Hazel and Gus, not just all of this, you know, we go to Amsterdam and we have this amazing love story and we're willing to do anything for each other. I would like if they show more of a raw, more open and vulnerable side of those characters, you know, not just, and I think they did with Gus, you know, in that ambulance scene, but I definitely think, you know, their entire lives, I wish that they show just more raw emotion, not just, you know, this love story, that more of the other stuff that makes a love story great. So